Everybody, my name is Dan Brown, and I'm with MDC, and we are one of the founding partners of Achieving the Dream, and we're based in Durham, North Carolina. And these are my colleagues, Jenna Bryant and Abby Parcell, who are also with MDC, and they'll be helping me out today. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about describing this program that ATD and MDC worked on with support of the Bank of America Charitable Foundation. And then we're going to have a short little exercise, and then we're going to talk through some of the lessons learned. And as much as possible, we want this to be interactive. So if you have questions, not understanding what we're talking about, just don't talk to me about the game last night. That's all I ask. But just raise your hand, and we'll call on you. So, or just shout something out. So let's talk a little bit about the project. So the project was, as I mentioned, a collaboration between these three organizations. So let me talk a little bit about what each of our roles were. So ATD, of course, provided the network of colleges that the colleges would receive pass-through funding to start programs aimed at financial literacy and financial empowerment. We'll talk more specifically about what each of the colleges were charged with doing in a minute. MDC, our organization, provided coaching to staff, technical assistance, and also set up a peer college learning network so the colleges could learn from each other on how the various ways they're enacting financial empowerment programs. Bank of America, through their Charitable Foundation, of course, provided the funding, so they were very key. But they also wanted to encourage their local branches and banks to provide volunteers to help each of the colleges institute these programs. So what were they getting money to do? Basically, each of these three institutions were receiving funding to scale their financial capability programs over a 2-year period. And as I'll describe, each were at different stages. One was very advanced and one was just getting started. Really, the goal of the whole project was to test different ways of enhancing financial capability of students. The idea being that if you got students on a more sound financial footing, the more likely they are to stay in school and not stop out due to some emergency financial distress. So I'm going to talk very briefly about each of the three colleges and what they did over the course of the 2 years. So Los Angeles Harbor College is the smallest smallest college in the pilot project. You heard the chancellor of the system talk about this vast system this morning. LA Harbor is actually one of the smallest, if not the smallest college in that system. It serves community of San Pedro. It's about 10,000 students. And so what they decided to do was focus on 2 cohorts of students to provide these services. The 2 cohorts they focused on, one was returning veterans of the armed services, and the second was students who are formerly in foster care. And so what they did was, the idea was to provide financial coaching, which is one-on-one financial counseling to students, providing information about things like budgeting, helping them understand their financial circumstance, providing resources about how to obtain funding for transportation, childcare, tax credits, that sort of thing. So they really wanted to focus with a small number of students because they were just getting started. And they also did provide some more campus-wide financial literacy workshops. But in generally, they did focus on these 2 cohorts of students. On the complete other end of the spectrum was the Houston Community College System, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, community college systems in the nation. And what Houston wanted to do was reach as many students as possible. So the first way they did this was to embed a financial literacy module into their student success curriculum. So that meant within their general student success for their general studies curriculum, they provided a unit on financial literacy. And then they also provided some online materials so that students could follow along and learn about issues related to financial literacy. They provided some training to the instructors, many hundreds of instructors they had, on how to deliver this module, so people were not going into it cold. So again, they were able to reach many numbers of students. They were able to reach, I believe, about 15,000 students received some sort of were touched in terms of financial literacy training during the course of the project. They also had a separate program where they had a financial literacy week on each of their campuses. So they would have, and they kind of did it in a rolling way where I think there's 9 campuses, and so they staged it, and then they had a week-long session on 3 campuses in the fall, and they brought it to another 3 campuses in the spring, and then another 3 the following year, just to kind of test the idea of having these financial literacy weeks. And during these sessions, they would offer workshops that were offered by local financial institutions, such as Bank of America and others, on a variety of financial capability issues, from understanding how to open a checking account to how to do your taxes, just a variety of issues that people thought that their student body would be most interested in. And the third was right here, the Community College of Baltimore County, which is, as we know, is just won one of the Austin Awards, which is very exciting. So they were the one college who had been really doing this prior to getting this funding. They had done something similar to what Houston had done and embedded a financial literacy module in their student success class. And one of the things they did in that training was really encourage people to save money, including passing out a piggy bank in which students over the course of the project had actually collectively saved over $50,000. Just, the idea of putting a little money aside each week to teach students about savings. So what they wanted to do, though, was begin to reach more students and kind of provide more direct counseling to the students, provide more information about about their financial situation and how they can improve their financial standing. So they wanted to provide more direct financial coaching. So they hired staff to provide this direct financial coaching. And again, they took a bit of a cohort mentality as well. The idea was that there was an emergency scholarship program at CCBC. So if a student had a financial distress moment, they would get the funds that could cover the cost of books or maybe a car repair, just something very small amount of money. But if they did that, then they were required to receive some financial coaching. So they tested that model out using this financial coaching model that I've talked about. And the final element that I'll just touch on is something that was really expanded upon in this initiative, but had been going on for a while at CCBC, which was to catalyze culture change at the institution through a faculty education, documentary videos, really to help faculty understand what is the circumstance that all the community college students are facing. Just to understand that there's students who have to take 3 buses to get to school, have to, scramble to even keep the lights on. So I encourage you, we'll talk a little bit about some resources that are available at the end of the presentation, but I encourage you to take a look at that video because I think it's really powerful and it's one that you can use and share with your faculty and supporters to help people understand the circumstances facing individual community colleges. So that's just a little bit of about each of the colleges. Now we're going to have a fun exercise. So let me turn it over to my colleague Abby, who's going to just describe what we're going to do, and here she is.
So we wanted to give you a chance to walk through what building a financial empowerment strategy on your own campus might feel like. And as we were talking through the different ways we could manage that, we thought about the Choose Your Own Adventure novels that we used to read. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have ever read one of these books? All right, so we've got a few. So for those that haven't, let me tell you how it works. It was generally maybe a mystery that you were trying to solve, or a thief you were trying to catch, or an assailant you were trying to escape, something like that. And you'd start out, on page 1, and you'd come to the cliffhanger, right? And you, as the reader, would get to decide, do you want to go down the long, dark hallway? Turn to page 47. Do you want to turn around and, call a friend? Turn to page 59. So we have created the Financial Opportunity and Community College Choose Your Own Adventure. And so we're going to start out on page 1 at Adventure Community College, and just walk through these scenarios. Make your decisions, see where it leads you. We'd like you to think about what decision you would make based on the context at your college, and see where you end up. So there should be enough booklets for everybody at the table to have one, and we'll give you about 7 to 10 minutes to go through the booklet. All right, any questions? All right, enjoy your adventure.
All right. So was this as exciting as Prisoner of the Ant People? What about You Are a Shark? All right. Well, I hope you guys had a little bit of fun with that. And like everything, there's a lesson here. So one of the things that we really have learned from our work, and particularly through our work on this initiative, is that there's no one-size-fits-all model for this type of work. Each of the colleges, and we think each of the colleges were successful in reaching their goals, but one of the main reason I think they were successful is they developed and tweaked the solution to fit their own needs and their own particular circumstances of the college. And that's really, that's the story of this initiative around financial capability, but it's really the story of almost any kind of successful initiative, is that it's not going to be particularly effective if it's imposed from outside the particular circumstances of the institution. So I wanted to just spend the rest of our time, and then hopefully we can open it up for discussion. Because one of the things I'd love to do, and I think we will have time, is to hear about if any of you all have instituted similar programs on your campuses or colleges, and what are some of the challenges you're facing, or some of the successes you've had that you want to share with everybody else in the room. So the first, and obviously I think in some ways the most important, is just that it's our belief that these types of services do make a difference, that they work, and we have a lot of data that shows that, both from this initiative and from past work with other colleges that have done things around financial capability. Each of the programs that we worked reported significant changes in the lives of their students on their knowledge of financial management. And although the data was pretty early with these colleges, because they haven't been doing this for that long, there was preliminary data that suggested that there was a real impact on persistence and retention. I want to recite a little bit of statistics from some colleges that have been at it a little longer, to show that there has been a real difference when these types of services are provided. For example, one of the colleges has really been probably the leading pioneer in offering financial capability training and coaching to its students is Central New Mexico Community College. And from fall of 2010 to the spring of 2011, the retention rate was almost 85% for students who access supports through the college program, and compared to about 71% for all first-time students. Another college that had these types of services is Des Moines Area Community College, and about 84% of their students who participated in this type of program enrolled in a subsequent term, compared to the college retention rates of about 70%. And finally, Skyline College, which is in San Mateo, California, had 80% of students enrolled in their financial capability program go to the next term, compared to college-wide of 66%. My phone will not advance this, apparently. Okay. One of the colleges that did participate really tried to get at what were the improvements on students' financial knowledge by using a survey. And so if you remember, this is the college that really tried to embed financial management, financial capability in their student success class. So this data shows that 96% felt more equipped to make sound financial decisions, 93% understood the financial aid process better, and 93% understood credit or credit scores better. I mean, this is a voluntary survey, so, it's back. We can take it with somewhat of a grain of salt, but still these are pretty impressive numbers, and they got a lot of people to fill out the survey. It was very well over 1,000 responses. So I think the data is pretty powerful. The second lesson that we got from doing this work is this notion of staged development, and that was reflected a bit in this Choose Your Adventure booklet that we handed out. It's really hard to just suddenly impose a system and have it turnkey and meet all your needs right away. And so each of the colleges that participated chose a certain entry point and with the idea that they would add on later. So you had Houston Community College, which started system-wide to reach as many students as possible, but with what we refer to as more lower intensity services, where you're not addressing students' particular financial needs, but providing services to the general population, with the idea that eventually they could maybe move to reaching more students one-on-one. Los Angeles Harbor College decided, because they were so new to this, they wanted to work with a group of these two cohorts, the students formerly in foster care and veterans, with the idea they were going to test this model out, and if successful, eventually take it campus-wide. And CCBC, which again was further along, this project itself represented the second stage of development, where they went from student success to more individualized training. And even one thing to point out about Houston Community College, they actually, even within their program, did some stage development on this initiative, in that I mentioned that they did this idea of not offering the financial literacy weeks system-wide. They wanted to test the model, figure out by having it at individual campuses in the fall, expanding it in the next spring, to figure out exactly what's working and how it can be tweaked to make it better. So just the idea that trying to go slow, figure out what works, and eventually expand it to reach as many students as possible. So this next lesson is again, and a lot of these lessons really are going to be pretty similar for any type of initiative. And we really believe that in order for any of these initiatives to be happy, to work, to make you happy, is that there has to be buy-in at the college leadership level. Leaders in most of the institutions, that needs to be at the presidential level. They need to understand that this is mission appropriate, that providing things like financial literacy and financial capability training is something that the college should do. And the way that these colleges are able to sell it, if you will, is to directly tie it into things like persistence and retention. There's all kinds of data that show that the primary reason, or one of the main reasons, that students stop out or drop out of college are not to do with academics, they're to do with financial concerns. So if you can get your administration or your president to understand that, they're going to be more likely to support the program. The second is buying in a more literal and monetary means, is that the funds have to be there. And this is why this was this project was so important. The investment that was provided through this grant was not substantial. It was $65,000 over a couple years. But we've had pretty good success in past projects with similar low levels of support. But it was critical that there was that monetary incentive at the beginning, and that some funds were committed to future years. So the next lesson has to deal with, we talked a little bit about the difference between higher intensity services and lower intensity services. So the basic idea is that a higher intensity service is one where you're providing direct assistance or counseling to a particular student. So that means that a financial coach or a counselor is working one-on-one with a student. So studies have shown that the more, and it makes sense, the more you're working closely with a student, you can have a more direct impact on that student's financial health, their financial knowledge, and really address concerns. You can help devise, what are your financial goals, how can you meet them, and you can't have that same type of one-on-one interaction when you're sitting in a student success class and have like a week to talk about generic financial issues. So there's no doubt that if you have the resources and want to have the highest impact, then having more direct interaction through a system like financial coaching is going to yield a greater impact. Of course, the rub is that it's going to cost a lot more money. Financial coaches, effective ones, are additional staff, and they require additional resources. And so it becomes very difficult to try to scale that program to reach campus-wide because it just requires so much in resources. So that's been one of the challenges, is trying to take the more financial coaching or the more higher intensive services to the next level. Is how do you make it work system-wide and or campus-wide? And colleges are continuing to struggle with that, not just these three, but others. So I know ATD talks a lot about data, and obviously we think it's really important. And I quoted some of the statistics that we've been able to gather in past projects, and there are, and you'll see it in some of the materials that we're going to talk about. There are a set of generally agreed upon the data that you want to measure through these programs, and there's some of the things that I've mentioned: persistence, retention. And so related to items directly dealing with community college work, but then there's also impacts on a student's financial stability that can be measured as well. So those are really critical that you keep track of, but one of the real challenges, ideally you'd want to have that as part of the way in which the institution collected data overall, so you could really tie in and say this intervention led to this student staying and how many times you met with this student. But the problem is very few colleges are able to have just one system that encompasses all of it. I think there was kind of a reference to that in the Choose Your Own Adventure booklet, where it suggested that you wanted a case management software system. And then when you did, it's like, do you know how expensive those things are? Because they're really great, but they can be really expensive. And if you get funding to do it, that's really that would be wonderful. Some of the other programs that we work with that have tried to add financial literacy to their programs that are non-community college system, they have a case management system. So this is just something else to add to it, and it works well. Trying to meld this with your standard institutional research programs can be quite difficult. But generally, I think if we're thinking about the couple goals that we want the data to show is, we want to make sure that the student is getting progress towards his or her goals, and that ultimately the data that's being collected is measuring the program's effectiveness. So the next lessons really relate to the importance and the challenges of effective community partnerships. So one of the things I mentioned at the beginning was the Bank of America's involvement. So again, we're really grateful to their generosity to provide funding for this, but I think one of the challenges was, one of their ideas was, or what they encouraged and MDC and ATD thought was a great idea, was that one of the ways to deliver these services was going to be work with bank employees who would serve as a volunteer basis. So, the idea was that they would provide counseling or coaching or do workshops, and it would be delivered by people at the local branches because they wanted to do a big community outreach push. I would say that was probably the biggest disappointment with the project, that the colleges were not able to really effectively, on a continual basis, engage these volunteers. Houston Community College was successful, for example, in getting some of Bank of America employees to make presentations at their financial literacy fairs, but for others, it was just really difficult. And a lot of that was because some of the mechanisms were not set in place from the get-go. So really, I think that, like a lot of things, the directive to encourage bank employees to ask volunteers came from the corporate office or the corporate foundation office, and who had never really cleared it with the branches or from the local markets. So there was a capacity mismatch between the colleges would call up the branches and say, "Hey, come over and help," and they were polite about it, but they're like, "Well, we don't really see the fit." So there wasn't as good enough understanding what is the capacity of the local partners to meet with the colleges. So it's kind of partnership 101 to know the capacity of your partners before you engage in such an activity. I think it's also really critical to make sure that the partnerships are formalized. We've had a lot of colleges that have had successful partnerships, either with private financial institutions or community-based organizations, where there's a memorandum of understanding drafted that understands, what each college is or each partner is responsible for. So there's no misunderstandings from either end. And it's also really critical in any type of partnership, whether it's I've been sat in several presentations over the past few days where it was mainly focused on employer engagement and talked about what is the value proposition. Why would an employer want to get involved in this initiative? They have to understand why you would want to get involved. So from the banks, I think the banks saw the value proposition potentially as, well, eventually getting people who are more bankable to become customers. And then, of course, there was a public service value and and the accordant publicity that would come with that. But again, I think a lot of the value proposition came from not the local folks who, it didn't help that Bank of America had a restructuring, so they were very staff strapped at the same time that this initiative was underway. So we've passed out a few of these resources, but I just want to talk a little bit about them before we kind of open this up to discussion. MDC has created something. There's a handout called the Working Family Success College Implementation Guide, this is just a handout. Abby's holding up the sheet of paper. It's really a neat free online guide that offers a roadmap of how to set up a comprehensive program aimed at improving the financial capability of your students. And one of the neat things about it is it also includes lots of tools and information that's developed by the colleges that have actually been doing this. So it's not just us talking at you. There's actually, I think there's a couple MOUs between partners that you can, free for you to download. And so I encourage you to take a look at it when you get back and just walk through and ask us any questions you have about it, and suggest any new materials that you want to add to it, because I think it's a very good resource. The second is a new report, and that was issued by the Boston Federal Reserve, and that just came out, I think, last week. And they passed out. They sent me some cards to hand out, so take those with you, and it's a really good report. There's case studies of about 8 institutions, including a couple of the ones that I mentioned when citing statistics that have been really effective at doing these kinds of programs. So I encourage you to take a look at that, just if you have any questions, I think that will go a long way to answer them. And then finally are a few papers that we have written, and they can be found on our website, which is www.mdcinc.org. And one is, of course, is the paper that we produced for this, which I believe there should be copies of the executive summary of. But you can download the full report from our website or Achieving the Dreams website. And then we also did a documentation study on the Center for Working Families, which was kind of the first initiative in providing these types of services at community colleges. So the documentation study takes a look at kind of the earliest colleges that were involved and has detailed case studies about what they've done and their successes and some of the ways they address some of the challenges. So please do take a look at all of that. So that's all I have. We've got a little bit of time, so I hope some folks have some questions or some thoughts. I'm curious to know if anyone has similar programs and what are some of the challenges that you faced, or if you have any questions about the particular of this initiative, if you haven't fainted from the heat yet. Yes, ma'am. No, LA Harbor, they really, both LA Harbor and Houston these were more new programs for them. They didn't have as much in place. It's really CCBC that had the one that was more in place. And LA Harbor, in the sense that they dove in, they provided much more financial coaching, so more higher intensity services from the beginning, as opposed to Houston, which kind of went a little slower. Well, I think for LA Harbor, it was that they saw a real need among these particular cohorts of students that were facing severe challenges, and so I think they've been searching for a strategy to address the needs of students formerly in foster care. So I think that was the impetus for them, was just trying to figure out a way for that, why they went a little more intense than some of the other institutions. Jenna, do you want to add to that?
So it also depended on staff capacity and who was available to do some of the work and their relationship with the students. So, and some of the programs, like I know CCBC and Houston had some other initiatives that were going on in the area, in their community, that they were able to leverage too. So that makes a difference.
Yes, sir. That's a great question. One of the challenges that some of the colleges have had is wanting CCBC for towards the end of the project, the financial aid office actually wanted to take over the program, and that became a real challenge, because the question is it going to be too focused on financial aid and to the detriment of trying to understand other financial issues. So I think it's really difficult to stay abreast of the constantly changing landscape of financial aid. I don't think there's an easy answer to that. So it's but some other folks might have an answer. And by the way, someone from Houston Community College who was instrumental for the program just walked in. So if you have any questions about the program, she knows a lot better than I do. Yes, of course.
challenges that we have is that it's a 1 credit hour course, and in the fall we delivered that class to 4,000 students. We have 198 sections. We do not have enough financial aid staff to come into every class and do that. So we elected to really go with more of an awareness piece. So we talked to our students about financial aid, but our bigger emphasis with the Silver Savings Project that was earlier mentioned, and now we're doing, some of you saw our Virtual Selves project that we're working on now in financial awareness. It's something that we can deliver to all students, and we let, because our class, Academic Development 101, is taught by all adjunct faculty. I have no full-time faculty. Therefore, we really are just going with awareness and letting financial aid folks come in and give us updates on what's new in financial aid. We'll hand out their materials, but we don't in any way try to say that we are the experts on financial aid.
I'm Maria from Jefferson Community and Technical College in Louisville, Kentucky, and we have just finished a second-year pilot with the Federal Reserve of St. Louis that we partnered with through our student success course, and they created financial modules for us to use. They came in and did trainings for all our faculty, and it was great. And I kind of piggyback off of you. We don't try to touch financial aid because there's no way we can get financial aid people in every class. They are creating modules that are used at orientation and that we can use in the classroom. But basically, we try to just brush over that as briefly as we can. But I would say, and this is kind of my question, with using adjuncts like we did as well, we also discovered through this whole process that our instructors did not feel comfortable covering material that they themselves were struggling with. You know, if it was an adjunct, budgeting is probably a big problem, or could be. So, you know, just having these kinds of lessons was very difficult for our faculty in our student success course. So I guess my question was, even though they did training, that was a big resistance piece. Did you have trouble with the instructors covering this kind of material outside of their comfort zone?
Kimberly, what do you have an answer to that? This Kimberly Coladoya was instrumental in the Houston Community College system. So I wonder if you, sorry to put you on the spot.
Yes, we did have some resistance from faculty, of course, who, again, didn't feel comfortable teaching the, we did have some resistance from faculty who felt a little uncomfortable teaching the materials, but we spent a lot of time with them, and the materials that we are using in the course are not anything that's in depth. And another component of our program, I'm sure it's already been discussed, is that we have a financial literacy fair. And so any questions that the students have after they get the information in their course, then at the fair they can ask the professionals, and also our financial aid department comes, and then just various financial institutions are able to come to participate in that fair. So the fair we have, basically we host them, we have 6 colleges, and so we host one fair one day at each college. And we, Houston has what's called the Houston Money Week, which is through our Federal Reserve Bank. And it's just a group of individuals who provide financial services and just financial support services. And so they have an education department, and so we just tap those individuals to come and provide presentations on our campuses. This year we're pushing for more of an interactive fair, so there'll be a lot more games, but there'll be 45-minute presentations. They have time slots. We run the students through the student success course, and it's open to all other students to attend, but the student success courses, the students in the student success courses are required to attend.
Other thoughts or questions?
What's the impact been to your default rate? Have you been able to measure for the students that have had the course any change in your default rate, or have you noticed any impact?
I need exercise. This is fun.
They're still working on that, and as a matter of fact, we have launched a default prevention team, and they are actually going to expand these financial literacy fairs over the next year. We have 6 colleges, but we have 22 campuses. And so, of course, it's very difficult to get to all of those campuses. But this new default management team is actually going to teach the curriculum that we teach in the student success courses. And they're going to go into different classrooms across the system to kind of get some more of that information out there to students who we haven't touched.
I think the default question is a major impetus, of course, for a lot of colleges wanting to get into this type of work, is trying to address that. And there's, I think been a lot of pressure on colleges to lower the default rate. So, this is again where the data comes in and the importance of collecting the data, with the caveat that it's very difficult to track that. Other thoughts or any other experiences folks want to share?
This is just a follow-up to the many questions about the teaching of it. You said that you were training teachers on how to have the financial literacy teaching methods, and I think you also said that you were teaching hundreds of faculty on this. So I take it that wasn't only in college success classes. I know you had your week focus. Were these trainings that were embedded in courses of many different subjects, or were they only the kind of extra sessions? Or I'm interested in anything more about that, both in terms of content and teaching methods. So,
and Kimberly, correct me if I'm wrong, the way that it worked at Houston in the past in Baltimore and traditionally is where where it's mostly done is in the student success classes particularly. So they weren't as embedded in a developmental English class. It was really just this targeted student success class that was already, it's a way to reach the most amount of students because the most people were required to take it. So that was the notion behind that. Oh, right. I mean, how many faculty were trained?
Yes, we have them and the training, we did 2 sessions in person to begin this whole process, but we recorded those trainings, and so it's actually an online module that the faculty can take before they start teaching the course. And then we also have just a guidebook and resources. So they just we actually put in a Dropbox, and they just go to the Dropbox. It explains all the sections they need to cover, and it has all the information that they need to cover in the course as well.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about working with these colleges, and I think folks have mentioned, the person here from Jefferson mentioned, using a different modules. There's a lot of different modules and items out there in the ether. I think you basically developed your own based off, I think, was it a Bank of America curriculum? A lot of different pieces together. So there's a lot out there, and I think most colleges have found that they kind of tweak it to fit their needs and information, and I don't think really any of it's proprietary. So it's a way to just develop something that's going to be effective for your own particular circumstances, your own particular students, and then which can address things like whether you want to have a bigger emphasis on issues like financial aid than on some other issue.
I was just curious if the 3 institutions was the only thing that was being implemented, the financial literacy or financial coaching, or were there other pieces besides that were also being implemented at the exact same time to help with financial stability and capability of students?
So that was not as much a part of this program. The programs that we've worked in, and you see this Center for Working Families and the Working Families Success College. It's a great question you're asking, because traditionally when we think of integrated services, financial literacy empowerment is just one part of it. We want to encourage folks to get access to work supports, public benefits, more explicit job training, which is not as usually as big issue at a community college. So these colleges were not charged with extending to those other items. Now, in some of the financial coaching, like in particularly in Los Angeles Harbor, there would be elements of that where they would offer students, like, here's how you can get transportation. And so that became a component of it because of the one-on-one financial coaching or counseling that was provided. Anything else? Well, thank you guys. You guys did great for late afternoon, so thank you very much. And thank you, Kimberly, and everybody else too.